Imagine standing on a stage in front of 200 wealthy professionals while your own mother strikes you across the face. The blow was so violent that my gold earring detached and spun across the polished floor. Everyone watched in absolute silence as my family tried to break my spirit. They expected me to weep and surrender my inheritance. But they did not know I held a secret that would dismantle their entire world within the hour. The disaster began 3 years earlier, when my grandmother called me out of the blue. Her name was Hazel, and she had spent decades teaching at a prestigious law school before her retirement. She told me that she was updating her final arrangements to leave me her luxury property in the city center. The apartment was valued at over $2 million, which was a fortune that would completely change my modest life as a young independent designer. My grandmother explained that I was the only family member who actually cared about her well-being. For a whole decade, I spent every Sunday sitting with her while my sister Chloe and my mother Diane ignored her completely. My family only cared about status and wealth, so they viewed my grandmother as a burden rather than a human being. When they discovered that the valuable property was coming to me, their fake affection instantly turned into bitter hatred. My parents summoned me to their expensive mansion for what they called a serious family discussion. My father Arthur sat in his large chair like a judge, while my mother and Chloe looked at me with cold judgment. They claimed that my grandmother was losing her mind, and that leaving the apartment to me proved she was unstable. They demanded that I sign a waiver to split the future money equally, but I refused to give up the gift. After that meeting, my family completely cut me out of their lives and treated me like a criminal. I only learned about the engagement of my sister through social media pictures of a lavish party I was never invited to attend. My mother started spreading vicious rumors among our social circles, claiming that I was a manipulative monster who took advantage of a confused elderly woman. I stayed quiet back then, hoping the cruelty would eventually pass. 2 years of complete silence passed until a heavy wedding invitation arrived at my small apartment. My mother called me that evening with a voice that sounded incredibly sweet and welcoming for the first time in years. She suggested that the upcoming marriage of Chloe to a wealthy young man was the perfect time for our family to heal. She then casually mentioned that I should bring the property transfer documents as a wedding present. I told her that the apartment belonged to me and hung up the phone with a sense of dread. A few days before the ceremony, my grandmother called me with a voice full of intense urgency. She told me that my mother was planning something terrible for the reception and gave me the direct number for her personal lawyer, Julian Vance. She instructed me to call him immediately if things went wrong, promising that she was ready to fight. The celebration took place at a historic luxury hotel filled with hundreds of elite lawyers and judges. I wore a simple dark gown, trying my best to remain completely invisible among the wealthy guests who looked at me with clear disdain. My sister Chloe approached me in her white dress and immediately demanded to know if I brought the legal paperwork. When I told her that the apartment was not hers, her face twisted with rage. During the main dinner, my mother walked up to the microphone with a glass of champagne and called my name. She announced to the entire room that I was about to perform a beautiful act of family generosity. She produced a thick legal folder on the stage and demanded that I sign over the deed to the newlyweds right then. The entire crowd began to applaud, completely unaware that I was being forced into a trap. I walked up to the stage and spoke directly into the microphone, stating clearly that I would never sign the documents. The applause died instantly, and the room became completely silent as my mother lost her mind. She called me a selfish child and struck my face so hard that my vision blurred. I calmly retrieved my fallen jewelry, looked my mother in the eyes, and walked out of the room to make a phone call to Julian Vance. Exactly 1 hour later, the grand doors of the reception hall opened and my grandmother walked inside. She was old and moved slowly with a walking cane, but her presence was absolutely terrifying to my parents. Beside her stood Julian Vance, holding a black leather briefcase that contained the destruction of the reputation of my mother. When my mother saw her own mother standing there, her face lost all color, and she began to tremble. My grandmother walked straight to the front of the room and addressed the stunned crowd of legal professionals. She announced that she was of perfectly sound mind and that her will legally belong to me alone. The attorney then presented the certified copies of the estate documents to the guests, proving that my mother had lied to everyone for years. My sister began to cry as the reality of the situation dawned on her. The real blow came when Julian Vance revealed a second set of documents regarding a beach house my grandmother used to own. My grandmother explained to the quiet room that the property had been sold for nearly $900,000 without her knowledge. She had been recovering in a hospital from a broken bone when the sale took place. My mother had forged her signature on the deed to pay off her own massive debts. The lawyer produced an official report from handwriting experts proving that the signature on the sale was a total fraud. The elite family of the groom looked at my parents with absolute disgust and immediately walked out of the building. The rest of the wealthy guests followed them, leaving my mother alone on the stage she had built for my humiliation. Her desperate attempt to steal my inheritance had ruined her entire life. My mother faced severe criminal charges for grand larceny and fraud, which forced my father to sell their mansion to avoid prison. The marriage of my sister was canceled before it even began, and they are now completely avoided by high society. I moved into the beautiful apartment with my grandmother, and we spend our days in peace. I learned that standing up for the truth is always worth the pain of breaking away from toxic people. If this story reminded you that family is about love, not greed, please hit that subscribe button right now. Your support helps me bring more powerful, real-life stories to light every single week. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss the next incredible journey.